And we continue on with the second half of the first class of a 3-part series on Maya and its 16 evolutes. Also the characteristics and limiting factors of it. And the 7 malas, which isn't in the title. Malas means imperfections in a way, but interesting, not the way we look at it in Judeo-Christianity, that imperfections are sins and so forth. Malas in Tantra are things you brought with you from a past lifetime on purpose to work them out, and as you work them out, they reveal your inherent perfection. And that's the whole mindset on imperfections in Tantra. Mala infers a fruit that blocks the sun behind the tree. So the fruit, when it ripens and falls off, there's an opening there through the tree that you can see more light. So the metaphor is very apropos and obvious that when you perfect these so-called imperfections, they fall away and you're left in freedom. So you could say this kind of a false superimposition of Maya if you're talking Vedantically, but tantrically speaking, you've got these apparent imperfections that you're just working on. So they're not black marks on your soul and sins and all that. It's a very good teaching, and Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother Shisharda Devi both used that when they would make statements like, the more desires increase for you, the better. Because they knew that for their children, the spool was spinning the other way. Before they took initiation with the great ones, they were rolling on red, white, and black karma. And that's good, bad, and mixed karma. But as soon as they took initiation, the spool stops and starts rolling off the other way. And this thread goes off the same way it goes on, she said. That means you feel in reverse these things going away. You can't just get away scot-free, you see. And so people need to know about that from a wise teacher like that and from their own guru, so that they know that, oh, this is just backwards moving karma. This is the way things, my malas get perfected or fall off, and I'll suffer a little bit in reverse from all these pleasures and pains, and these acts I did. But it's like burnt ropes. They can't bind me anymore. They're on the way out. The problem is some people begin to go back and think that these are real, that they're not getting rid of their karmas by the mantra and the practices and so forth, and so therefore they give up the path halfway. It's very risky in Maya. A good way to start this teaching, because we'll look at the 7 malas soon. But first we want to finish up these 2 levels of Om, which we find inside of Mahamaya, her great vibrating sphere or pool of productivity or potential, as it said at the Pashanti level. And then you have Madhyama as the 3rd phase of the word. Remember, we're about here along this chart and this trajectory heading toward the 4 kinds of Shakti powers, the main Shakti powers, which I'll show you. But here in the meantime, you get to Madhyama, this intermediary or middling stage. Thought vibration as concepts begin to happen. And you can almost put this together with coming out of deep sleep, waking up out of dream, and then into waking. So you're bringing back certain thoughts that you went to sleep with. It may be a bit random at first, and they're coming at different days and different nights or weeks apart. But basically you can connect things. Oh, I thought about that last week, and here it is again as a thought. And now it's actually come into my life. If you master a process like that, then that's where Holy Mother would say, I used to think of things and they'd happen the next day. That's something I would want, or something that I preferred or needed for the good of people. There it would be the next day right in front of me. So it's almost spontaneous. The Icha Shakti, the power of will, the wisdom that you have that produces it, the act of bringing it to you, and the substance it's made of is all the 4 Shaktis working. I'm getting ahead of the graph there a bit, but it comes up in this context. Thought vibration as concept. So you might as well go back to this castle chart here and bring up Mana Kalpa Pita Jagat, the world created by the mind, to know that the mind in charge of Om, or invested with Om, does this in its 3 states of consciousness. Deep sleep, dreaming, and waking. Sushupti, Swapna, and Jagrat. And then of course there's a transcendent witness beyond all that, which is, gravy on top of mashed potatoes. It's the real fine stuff. So at the Madhyamaka level, or Madhyamavak, differentiated unity, here's where you could start to see differences in things, if you want to put it very simply. That something that was uniform, pure, wasn't yet being pulled apart and sent in different directions, hits the mind, like in that streaming particles, when it hits the mind, you see it hits the world and so forth. It gets fragmented and thrown apart. And that's a natural thing, but the soul looking on has to know these avenues are going in different directions, and with its discriminating wisdom, it can stay away from certain directions that would be bad routes or dead ends, and stay with the point of the thing. Bring the light into the world. Looking back on this chart still, the jyoti, the sound, seeing light and sound here, like are you just seeing sunlight and hearing things on the air? Or are those cosmic principles that were way back in the Word, and they happen in dreaming and they happen in deep sleep even, at a very, very causal level. And everything about manifestation comes into expression by this at a very grand level. The individual can be at that very grand level. That's the beautiful thing about these teachings, is that in some traditions you cannot be God. You probably can't even see God or get close to God, which is a kind of a historical fact. But in this tradition, you are that. Or let's turn that around and say that thou art. Tat Tvamasi, one of the great Mahavakyas, see, of the whole process. So that behooves you then to move into that level of consciousness, always. And so you're always watching this happen and taking it back. See, going up and down the amber stairs of birth and death is one of my favorite expressions Sri Aurobindo used in his writings. A person who's conscious of these stages and steps and knows that he's the immovable principle who sends by the behest of the four Shaktis, wills it, knows it, acts it, and consists of it, uses everything as stepping stones for this projection of mind into even the very lowest state of Vaikari. So back here, just a little bit of commentary. You could see here that we saw that it was static and stationary and imperishable there. At the Pashanti stage, it was potential for manifestation, but it was still very pure. Here, it's concept, thought, sound, and meaning conjoined. That's about as concise as I can make it, that could be understood. That you're to think that these things were not brought together here. See? Or they were in a state of formless oneness where they weren't needed, like getting beyond thought, getting beyond action, like you do in deep sleep, and certainly in samadhi. But here they become necessary and needed for the next level of the word to vibrate for beings at that level of existence, at that vibration. The ancestors or the gods and goddesses, and bridging on human beings, and how they will react or respond to the word here. What is these many words? Usually Vaichitra. The more you can tell me, the better. But it's not very high. Can you tell me anything higher? No. I don't know anything higher than Aparavidya. You see, so anyway, a point made that's related. But at the level of concept, thought, sound, and meaning, then you have to meditate on that. I'm thinking about something, I'm going to bring it into being. So I have the thought of it, I conceived of that, the thought is acting it out. There's a sound I must know to it, a bijam, like water. If you're just taking a bunch of children and saying, air, then all of a sudden they'd think air. Has to be like that in your mind. And this is just one of the elements that's floating in the conceptual mind. And if you understand that you can coalesce all these four things, and there's more that can be said here for this, form and name, and name is also floating in there. I have a thought of it, there's a concept, I have to give it a name. What kind of form is it going to take? That's pretty much happening later. But there is name and form to your thoughts too, right? So the bijams are operating at different levels of expression is a nice word. And so now that I've finished a little bit of commentary on Madhyama, I want to show you that I snuck in here at each one of these levels. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Let's see, where is it? And the Word was God. I put first. So I had to take the order of this saying of Jesus to John, I think, and put it, and the Word was God. Then later, in the beginning was the Word. That's when Pashanti happened. And then later, and the Word was with God. So now you've got the Mother as a companion in this ideation period of the Word, Madhyama. And then Vaikari, as we finish this up, which I'm glad we will to get on to more of this main chart, is the rudimentary phase. But of all this here, I think my very favorite teaching that's most applicable to everyone right now is right there, what I just said. You should take apart those things that make up an object in its subtle form and think about them before they came to be differentiated. That's why these words, differentiation, unified, unity and all that, are steps which you'd use philosophically to understand this. You'd give this to your students. So you'd know not just how great thinkers here on earth are thinking, because they might only go as far as a Paravidya in their thinking, even in philosophy, but how the great seers are thinking before this, and how the Trinity thinks above them, and how the Mother purveys over the Word and uses it through her four Shaktis, which we're about to get to. So here's where you hear Vaikari, rudimentary, sharp differentiation, not just of differentiated unity and so forth, but on to sharp differentiation. Why? Because the thought has become the object. This is that simple. And nobody's going there. See? This is where nature, 5 elements are separate. The scientific view is that's all there is, and basically it's evolved over a long time. There wasn't any earth here in the first place, then it was all water, and then some earth happened, and lava, and so they're all thinking in terms of how the 5 elements came into being. From what? From an explosion, or over long periods of time? On one level only. So this is the way they've been thinking since they were apes, in the mind of the highest thinking ape, you see. The king of the monkeys, as Vivekananda has said, teaching the other monkeys, had a thought one day, So great thoughts at whatever level don't get to the fact of what lies beyond thought. Neither does it broach the fact that thoughts turn into objects through her powers, you see, will, wisdom, and so forth, and production of substances, This is where a teaching like this begins to fill in these kinds of gaps in the evolutionary theory and takes it to a much higher level. And of course, I think the 7-day creation theory is just meant to be metaphor. That's kind of what I've concluded. Anyone who takes it literally, well, it's like I've always said, you're taking the wrong things in the Bible literally, and there are good things in the Bible that you're not taking literally enough. So that causes superstition in religion, and you want to get rid of that and come to the truth of the matter so that all religions reflect things like the Word was with God, and in the beginning was the Word. But don't end up modeling your religion after origins, because the greatest truth is non-origination. And science has even found out matter can't be destroyed, nor can it not be destroyed. It's indestructible, and it's non-originated, actually. So unoriginated is the great teaching of Advaita, that there is no beginning, middle, and end to it ever. You just thought there was because you were looking at it with ignorance, not with wisdom. Maya got a hold of it and made it look other than it is. And that's true of almost everything, from Avyaktam all the way down. And you don't even know what Avyaktam is. Seeds in nature, which are actually in the mind, the great mind, which you actually have words with sounds and concepts and everything to them, which the mother oversees through the word. All of that's missing. It's just gone. Okay. And if you call it back in any scripture, it's not needed anymore, you see, because we're past that or something. Yeah, you're past it. It's called the Kali Yuga when you get past that. And you've forgotten Sat, the Satya Yuga, where all this truth was prevalent. So here's where, and I'll say it a third time, objects are just thought made concretized. And these are the two ways Holy Mother put it in the 1900s. When she tried to tell people about this great wisdom, it's too much to teach them all this. Too much for the poor Hindus because, they had come a long way from the Upanishads and so forth. And they're maybe reciting the Gita and being good, pious people was about all they could manage, and couldn't give it to the Westerners because they already had preconceived theories about all of this on a physical level only, and you couldn't change that tide. Even if you had a higher idea about matter, like Einstein did from Newton, you couldn't change that. The intelligentsia was fixed on Newton and what he said. So how could you bring this whole idea of finer atomics into it? So same way here, atomic particles, now we want to shift to atmic particles, you see. From atomic to atmic, and then your intelligence is a kind of particle flowing down from the light of pure conscious awareness. Down means out. So when it comes so far out, then you've got sharp differentiation, and everything that was in the mind as thought breaks into objects. And this is why in yoga you want to meditate on the objects and dissolve them, right, to their source. So you get the object together and say, oh, I'm neither attached nor unattached to this. Actually, that's given me kind of a lot of bliss here. So I'll call that my first samadhi, the samadhi of objects. And then I'll step back from that. Now they tell me that I should rid myself of attachment to physical objects and meditate as if they were in my mind. So that's going to fill in this gap, meaning that the objects actually came from me, from my own thinking process. And some misconceptions that I've held, maybe for lifetimes, are getting destroyed as I think that way, because I stopped blaming God for all my troubles, for one thing. The infernal object turns into the eternal subject, as I like to say. But between that, you have to stop thinking of the objects as being infernal, devil-based, because they're giving you suffering because you lose them and they're stolen and they don't work anymore. And like the space bar in my computer lately, they gave out. So I type away, I look up, and I got one big, talk about the word, got one big long sentence. God, I have to do that over, And the space bar gave out right where my thumb comes down, not the rest of the bar, you see. So talk about Maya getting into the devil's in the details, So I'm typing along, my thumb's doing the space bar, and it's not doing anything, because it's not connecting right there in that one place where I need it. See how it works, Maya? Isn't it wonderful? So the rest of the bar works, thank thee, so I can go back and correct. So I'm just saying, you see, so the word has a lot of problems with it, potentially. And when it gets to this, I think all of us know about the problems. I could easily segue from there to the Evolutes of Maya right now. But unfortunately for you, I'm not going to. There's too many other things to fill in. However, knowledge made manifest is how it's said here, and it's where gross sound or speech comes into being. And the great ones, including our Holy Mother, said, be silent. Father of yoga, the first doorway to yoga is silence. Be quiet. Things that happen all around you, don't speak about them. You should come to know them so you're living an informed life. Akamai is the word in Hawaiian. You become in the know about things going around you, but you don't speak about them, she says. And no gossip, no fault finding, no putting your nose where it shouldn't belong. So all of that comes here at the level of Vaikari. And to close this up, now that we know how the word works in 4 phases, and remember how to connect that with, your waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and transcendent samadhis and other teachings that go with it. Here's that quote from the Agamas. The mother word is the essence of Brahman as Akshara, the imperishable. The Tantras call her Paravak. The Vaidika scriptures designate her as Shabda Brahman. So she's the supreme word in Tantra, and she's the sound principle, the path to sound in the Vedanta, in the Vedas. And from the Svachandra Tantra across, no one sounds the word voluntarily, nor can anyone prevent it from sounding. The deity presiding in the hearts of all sounds it spontaneously. A beautiful, I had to look for a long time because a lot of the tantras aren't in English. But if you've come upon sayings like that, then that deity in your heart, of course, you're going to say that's Mahashakti or Mahamaya. And the fact that it's continually sounding itself and nobody can stop it means eternity. Means that everything's eternal. It's just that eternity breaks into cycles if you watch it. And goes back to a source again. And on top of that, I'm going to have to know that all that is just a dream. It's just a play that happened inside of the mind. And so no mind, no matter. No matter, never mind, as my teacher used to say. Think about it. If there's no mind, there's no play. There's no matter. There's nothing going on. Everything is held in abeyance. And if there's no matter, never mind, because there's nothing to talk about. People are talking that is not being silent because of matter. And Vaichitra and everything around matter, which we'll get to. So there we put another great, powerful chart in accordance with this teaching on Mahamaya and Maya to bed for a while. Let's look at the next, which is those 4 Shaktis. Now here is another major retreat chart. This is how to show charts of the 300 I've given, how to show 3 or 4 ones that take a whole week to discuss in just one class. So this is, of course, from Lord Vashishta, from the story of Ikshvaku. And he went to his great-great-grandfather of the solar line, Svayambhuva, and asked him, okay, well, I've learned all the teachings now, but you're up there as the great-grandsire of the solar line. You tell me, how would you explain that the universe comes into being? And he's talking about the whole shooting match, this chart on the castle here. How does all this come into being? I want to hear your take on it. And so reading that story inspired me to put this together, and it's similar to this in a sense, if you look at it. All-pervasive Brahman, giving rise to potent Shaktis, the 4 main ones and a bunch of other little ones. In this chart, I didn't put what the other little ones are. And there you see the cosmic egg that's around it, and then another cosmic egg, Hiranyagarbha. So it all comes, Hiranyagarbha is an ancient word for everything that's contained in a fertile egg and its potential to form and to form. Surrounding the whole thing is Atmic reality on all sides. That's the non-dual. That's all-pervasive Brahman, the reality of pure conscious awareness. This is all happening inside of it. Everything happens inside of Brahman. Without happening, we might say. And so if you come down, there's Hiranyagarbha, call it Mahat, great mind if you want, and all universes, the 5 elements and objects, putting this, all the 24, at least 20 of the 24 cosmic principles right there in this chart. And the eternal Gyanam rays that feed it from Atmic reality. Just like, lasers or arrows shot constantly at it. Particles, intelligent particles being shot at it to give it life. And that's what they are directing. She is directing through her 4 sub-Shaktis. Get to that in a minute. But all the way down, and this is much like this chart also branching off into evolutes and cosmic evolutes, or branching off into getting reborn in ignorance, or returning to Brahman. We'll look at that again soon, the 2 options. This also is much the same way. Once objects and elements are present, then you see on the one side, association with Chinmatra removes ignorance. Chinmatra means particles of Chinmaya, of intelligence. On the other side, association with ego and sankalpa creates illusion and bondage. Look at the double line there, because you can't go anywhere with that. Here, you can. So you destroy sankalpa in this way, you see. Otherwise, you're falling into your double lines there. You're stopped. Here, you remove your ignorance, you destroy the tendency towards sankalpa, you focus your mind on the Atman, you attain abhava, no moods, non-duality without moods, and realize that all is Brahman. So you're back at the all-pervasive Brahman again. Went through that quick enough, didn't we? What I really brought this chart forward to do was to point out the 4 Shaktis, and for that then you get a reading on them. Four aspects of Shakti. Creative force, designated Shakti, is inherent in Brahman. Shakti is the dynamic power, but Shaktiman is the wielder of that power, and her names are legion. Parashakti, Mahashakti, Mahamaya, these names are most worthy of worship. They invite all praise and verily shout victory, which is Jai, Jai. The Mahashakti gets her work accomplished by 4 main sub-Shaktis. These 4 Shaktis, her will, her wisdom, her spontaneity and activity, are one with the Divine Mother, like vibration is one with music. First of all, Icha Shakti. So we're kind of, I think you can take this chart off and we can go here by this reference to it. So we follow back the main chart. Icha Shakti is Mother's powerful her powerful will that determines what her creation will consist of in any given age, Yuga or Mahayuga, in what sequence all occurrences that are to take place will manifest, and how embodiment will take place. All of this is to be seen in terms of both physical universe, which we experience with our senses, and of other worlds less changeful than ours, in which her fixed powers, lovingly known as the gods and goddesses, reside. So the gods and goddesses are her manifestation. They do her will. Icha Shakti. Brief, I think, and to the point, so we understand this. Jnana Shakti is Mother's wisdom force, contains and implements all subtle powers for manifestation. As intelligence, this Shakti extends to the highest and deepest regions, permeates them all. In her is vested the power of revealing the 4 manifestations of the Word, which you just saw, Para, Prashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari. Stages wherein pure conscious awareness lends itself to gradual degrees of expression, ending in the creation of the physical universe. She is Mother's force of truth and meaning, and symbolizes all that is, was, or ever will be. So Jnana Shakti they quite often put that first, the most important of her. Kriya Shakti pours life force into the gross and subtle creations, permeating all worlds and realms with vitalizing power. She is the breath of the Mahashakti. Not only is she responsible for the activating force, she also acts in and through that which she animates. In short, the doings of all living beings proceed through her impetus. In her purest condition, she is the free expression of effortless and spontaneous design in action, totally unencumbered. When interacting with Jnana Shakti at the highest level, insightful realizations begin to spring forth. She awakens and reveals the presence of genius and drives everything to its innermost potential. And Drovya Shakti, known as the producer of substances, manifests the 5 elements and distributes them proportionally throughout the vast creation. In her role as producer, she helps mold the netherworlds, the heavenly realms, as well as interlacing them together with gross and subtle substances, like Akasha, Prana, and Tanmatra, if you want to refer back to last week's classes. Thus, the subtle foundation of the universe, as well as the etheric nature of the lokas, are all due to her presence and activities. At the time of dissolution, called pralaya, she assists in the breakdown of all insentient principles, dissolving forms entirely. I hope that wasn't too painful. The readings I tend to minimize in my classes so we can have more direct teachings as they arise. But of course that is spontaneous Shakti when they arise. That's Kriya Shakti working through the teacher that these teachings can be given. And then of course in you, she's working to understand them through Jnana Shakti. And if not, then you should call on her will to open up so that you can understand these teachings and get the transmission. So all of that now have covered out of the great principle, the one great principle. We've covered Paravak, Om, and Shaktis. Now we can look at, without a chart needed, we can look at these 10 characteristics of Maya. It's a quick study. And some of it's a little shocking when you think about it. It is eternal. However, it's illusory. It is insentient. So those first 3 are informative. If, of course, the word is inside of Mahamaya, then of course this must be an eternal principle. Remember our definition: name, form, time, space, and causality. That covers a lot. Covers everything as a definition for Maya. And of course Maya that 5-fold definition looks different at the causal level of the word than at the subtle and at the gross. So you can begin to apply these connections to understand the facets deeper. When they say it's illusory, they want to follow it right away by saying it's insentient. So it's not a devil out to get you, as I used to say a lot. Not like an incarnate evil that is somewhere out there or down there, as the case may be, which is a lot of superstition. The devil is in the details, and there's a lot of details in Maya. So you're going to have to be very clear about principles leading to details, which is Dharma, basically. And it'll keep you, as has been said already in this class, from having to suffer the 16 Evolutes. You'll take another trajectory. So we are looking at this class on this chart right now on live stream. I mean, it can take you might be a good quick, before we look at the rest of these, from Maya, Prakriti, nature, starts to show itself, and then the birth of the jivas happens right about there. We get the worlds ready for you with producing of substances and so forth. You see how it works? And everything's waiting for you, and then the birth of the jivas happens. So your birth happens inside of that yuga. Maybe many births, but we'll save that aside because there's some more very powerful teachings of Maya in the rebirth teaching. From there, you fall into aparavidya. It's almost natural because you came out of paravidya. Where are you going to go? There's nothing higher than that. And you're taking a birth. So somewhere in there, you say, well, the Shaktis are going to afford me nature, the materials of nature. And then that's going to afford me a body, because my body is made of the 5 elements. And when I get that, I have my birth. And there I am in the realm already of aparavidya. See, paravidya, unless I'm careful, might as well be gone. See, at this point. So basically, there's 2 ways to go from there. Their souls with discriminating wisdom will take up the Vidya Shakti. The opposite of that is avidya Shakti. So just like there's paravid and aparavid, then there's also, which is more like this powerful descent of awareness. Then there's the Shaktis that are much more like Maya and avidya Maya. I have that chart to show you really quickly, but in this little guided tour, these souls will stay away from what leads to bondage, that is Maya's evolutes. And I have a chart to show you for that too. Those souls with discriminating wisdom take Vidya Shakti as their refuge. May she, the primal guide, my refuge be, as Vivekananda said, which is one of my favorite English mantras. And then that leads to liberation back to Paravid. And so this is another way of saying, more along the Tantric Shaivite way, and what Lord Vasishtha taught in his time, of a quick guided tour of one birth or not. See? One birth in bliss, peace, knowledge, with her as my guide, or betraying my guide, or falling out of memory of my home, my true home, the home of peace, which is Shiva's own abode. They call him the home of peace. All right, quick guided tour. So we got the first half of this chart sort of as a concept, remember, and all that concept means. Let's look then at the 10, go on with the 10 characteristics. It's eternal, it's illusory, and it's insentient. So we ended up with it's insentient, so you'll think of it that way. Because remember at the beginning of the class I was saying that the teachings were saying that it causes delusion in the mind of the individuals. It also causes illumination. So remember that part, so that the bitter pill is more easily swallowed for something that you can anticipate in terms of enlightenment, moksha. Like we could bring out the 4 fruits of, I'm going to give that as the first class in our seminar in a couple weekends, I think. So you can be on hand for that, our first live streaming seminar that we're giving in SRV. And so in that you'll have the first teaching, the first class will be on the 4 fruits of life, Purusharthas they're called. And so that starts with Dharma and goes on with Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So following along some of this same trajectory then, you see how taking to Vidya Shakti is going to fulfill your desires in Dharma and fulfill your need for materials and your desire for them. And because you have Draupadi Shakti there, why wouldn't it be that way? You just pray to her to give you what you need. And then get moksha at the end, so it's all built into the package. 4 fruits of life is a mother teaching that's very precious to us. So we'll speak on that at the seminar. First class. That's a Friday morning, I think, or Friday. So that in response to this, it is insentient. That's a good thing, isn't it? That it's not something purposefully out to get you, because that has been a problem in other religions, to invent a power like that, that's somehow not in yourself or not in God and is alien. I think everyone, the Quran says, God he brought forth his favorite human being. Said, my perfect creation was this human being. He said, now everyone, all you angels, bow to him. So they all came bow to him, but Iblis didn't. And Iblis turned into the devil later. See, it was because he wouldn't bow to this God's perfect creation, mankind. So it's a nice teaching with a little bit of a bitter pill in it, but nevertheless, this means that we are God's perfect creation. Right? We should be cut in the Lord's image. And those aren't old teachings that you throw away. Those are teachings you aspire to bring back if they're gone. And then other information about Maya is that it transforms and changes all the time. Maybe one of the most important of all of them. You can't build your house on shifting sand, Jesus said. You have to build it on bedrock. It's going to be very hard to find bedrock anywhere in Maya. But you might find it in Mahamaya. Starting from Dharma up, if we want to go back to the castle in the sky chart, there are some things you can base your life on that are much less changeable and volatile, blowing up in your face, starting with the Dharma up. And, moral and ethics down, because that was also on that chart of the castle in the sky. Things begin to get a little potentially wobbly. The sand, all of a sudden, begins to be the only thing you can see to build anything on. So it transforms and changes is a very painful teaching about Maya, and one that a lot of people never get over, never understand. It's the seed to creation. So creation here, of course, Shrishti Rahasya, they mean the secret of creation. And the main facet of the secret is everything is mind made manifest. It's all thought that came out of you by the billions of you. Billions of Purushas, if you want, and billions of other jivas who maybe don't know about their Purusha yet. So the whole thing is incredibly multifaceted and diverse. But if you know where the seed of it is, isn't that going to help you? When you see that seed next time, maybe you'll refrain from watering it? Do I want to take that chance again? Or shall I just get seedless samadhi, near bijam, right? Or a sampragyata. It causes manifestation. If it's a good manifestation, not so bad there. Otherwise, it's questionable. It has no beginning or end. Kind of along with the first one, it is eternal, but somehow they put that in there anyway, and to drive it home more. Because you can say, oh, it's eternal, and I hear people saying that all the time. But then they act like it's not. In acts, thoughts, words, deeds, in study of scripture, in their definition of God or Brahman, they act as if it's not eternal. So they're making it more clear here. It has no beginning and end. Might as well read the Gita where Sri Krishna says the very same thing to Arjuna. There is no beginning, middle, and end to anything, Arjuna. It's just Maya makes it look so. So this is where the appearances, which are insentient, because you say, oh, that's an appearance, and some power is making that happen, you see, other than me. Or some power is veiling my mind. No, you're veiling your mind. And you should go to the unveiling power to strip that misconception out by your own will. So this is man-making policy, as Vivekananda called it. Now, women are like men too in this way. You see. As the teaching of Vivekananda, the men should become more like women, and the women should become more like men. He wasn't playing favorites. That you have to get rid of weakness. That was his one rule for it. You must get rid of weakness. Number two, you should not cause violence to anyone. Typical India. But weakness was the greatest sin. And of course we call that what? Not a sin, but a mala. A mala. Something that I'm going to outgrow, and when it falls, I'll have more light. It'll give me more impetus. See? More impetus. Like running with weights, and then the joggers, right? And it's funny, I had a dream last night that we were playing baseball with my brothers and some other people, and it was at a professional kind of level, so that we went out to the mound and the field, and the baseballs were a little too big. And we were practicing with them, warming up. You see, I turned to my brother and said, "These are kind of big than they used to be. They changed their regulation or something?" And then the game started, and they took those away and threw us the real baseballs. I said, "Oh, these are easy to handle now." So I actually dreamed that last night. And so that's the idea with running with weights and everything. Sins are like that. We call them malas, and you're just weighed down by them, and you'll be very happy to know that when you get rid of them, you'll be much lighter, move much faster, go much deeper, understand at a much higher level. And so use them that way. Don't just labor under their ponderous weight, because you don't have any will in the matter, because you haven't been given wisdom, because you don't have any action of your own, and because you're considering it real when it's not. It has evolutes similar to it, and that's where it gets dicey. Evolutes of Maya, you don't want me to go there, believe me. You probably already know enough about it just by seeing the media and newspapers and TV. It supports karma, another very questionable characteristic here, very, very potentially painful. So if you can outstrip Maya with realization, then what place do karmas have in you anymore? Other than the good ones, which you'll probably also want to neutralize. It can be recognized. It can be recognized as a final breath of fresh air in all 10 of these. If you recognize it, it'll go away. And that's what I read at the very beginning of the class today in that opening paragraph, or opening several paragraphs, and Sri Ramakrishna was saying that. So to recognize it then is to know the Dharma and teachings around it and watch it evaporate. The unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. If you can change your thinking based upon that one statement in the Gita, then you're going to look at Maya, or you're going to look at everything as if it is Maya all of a sudden. Then you're going to see how Maya disappears when you have higher wisdom, and it turns right into Brahman itself. The poison in the snake, takes you to the snake. Ten characteristics of Maya. So I think I went through those with enough commentary so that I really don't need to read anything out of this article about it. But let me check to make sure I don't overlook something. Therefore, let's look at the next two, which I don't have any charts on, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Prakriti, I could have brought the 24 cosmic principles, but I thought you'd be happy if I didn't. Use that for your Samkhya reviews. Yeah. But remember, Prakriti always also has an unmanifested side, where those seeds are. And in the cosmic egg is actually one big seed that's going to give rise to a lot of things. And then the birth of the jivas, which is your reincarnation teaching. I could have brought, of course, charts on that too, but we've gone through them enough. Really probably good to get down to this aparavidya level where the soul can go either way, Vidya Shakti or Avidya Shakti. And I think that that's where I'd like to bring this chart up. Oh, actually, that's what I was thinking. Let's bring this chart up first at the birth of the jivas. The mind's release from rebirth. I hope you have it. This is also a story, like I've told you earlier, a lot of this is out of Tantra, Shaivism, and a lot of it's from Lord Vashishta, one of the earliest teachings of Maya, because he dealt with it so readily and so deeply with Sri Ram, and that one little seed of Maya he had in his mind. So you see here Ram's request to Vashishta, please inform me as to the nature of this dual mind and inert body, and how the soul entwines itself inextricably in repeated rounds of birth and death on the wheel of samsara. We wish some of our 14-year-old American children would come up and ask us a question like that. Of course, we'd probably drop our jaws and fall over backwards. But, you've been studying the eternal Dharma of the world. Wonderful. Well, here, let me tell you a story about how Lord Vashishta answered this question for Sri Ram, because it goes back to a story I could read again, like I did at the beginning, of another instance of how Lord Brahma took his mind-born child of Vashishta and drug him into this situation. Remember, he cursed him with Maya and made him forget himself and tortured him. What a good father, right? And brought him out of that, And then later on, he said, I have another test for you here. I'm going to take you to this loka where there's this being called Manas. Manas means mind. So I'm going to take you to this realm to meet Manas, and I want you to observe him. We're going to look at him for at least one lifetime. So, time just goes like that when you're with Lord Brahma, you see. Because one day is 4 billion years, and one night's 4 billion years. You get the idea. So, basically here is how this story in Lord Vashishta got put into a graph. The soul projects a world of dire illusion and dwells therein, is the first. That's impure mind. So, unlike the charts I've been showing you where we're starting at the top and coming down, I ask you now to switch and start at the bottom. Right down here in the very mud of Maya, where people don't know a thing about their spiritual life, about their true nature, believe they're sinners, think there's a hell, and other very untenable, unacceptable teachings that we've been given. There isn't even any rebirth that helps you. So, or a teaching of Dharma on it, or dynamics that you're given that help you refine the soul to help you remember your true nature, what to speak of just get beyond immorality. Interesting Freudian slip there. So, projects the world of dire illusion and dwells therein. That's what Manas, this soul, was doing. And just to go through it quickly, he moves, and remember, we're doing this at the level of the birth of the jiva. After all of this has been, here's your opportunity to take Vidya Shakti and just return to your true nature, or not, fall into avidya, which means lack of wisdom. So they watched, Vashishta and Lord Brahma watched as Manas moved restlessly and caused himself to bleed amidst sharp brambles and thorns of sense objects. So they're actually seeing him in a world where he's crawling through brambles and thorns, crying out in pain and suffering. Then they watched what he did after he got out of the brambles, subject himself to endless pains via self-inflicted whips of unfulfilling desire. Poor Manas. Then they wondered what he'd do after that. He dug a well of darkness and went in it in abject misery and just stayed there. And, they watched him for another few days of that time in that particular loka. He came out and decided he'd seek release from ignorance and take refuge in pleasure. Bad move, see? Bad idea. Then he seeks release from ignorance and takes refuge in pleasure. Then he goes to the next level, projects a pleasure garden, builds something like that, but soon falls into fatigue and remorse. That's, the prana gets satiated, and that good idea he had all of a sudden, gluts his senses, and he's not happy anymore. He's bored. and then he gets reborn in ignorance. So this is what happens, and this bottom half of the web here of Maya is what souls are doing all the time, they say. That is, who's they? The seers say this. And you'd have to believe them when you saw the suffering of the world. Why wouldn't you want to believe Lord Buddha when he told you about the Four Noble Truths and how people are caught in samsara? Because that would be one of the pillars of Buddhism, like at least in Zen, that you would have a great resolve that he's telling you the truth. Everything he said was the truth. So, I didn't put it in this chart, I don't think, but they watched him do this for lifetimes. And Vasishtha finally got very tired of it. He said, he'll never learn. Let's go. Let's go back to Brahmaloka. It's so much nicer there. I want to talk with my other 9 born sons and daughters. Talk about Dharma. So he said, no, I want you to wait. We have to watch him one more. So they watched him, and at that time, at the end of that lifetime, they watched him because, in the story, by the way, Lord Brahma went up to him and talked to him before he fell into the well and tried to counsel him. And Vasishtha was there listening to this wise counsel that this member of the Trinity was speaking, and wouldn't listen to it. Was very, very against it and so forth. So Lord Brahma, one of the Trinity, couldn't even convince his soul. So he let him go again. He fell into the well. But this time when he fell into the well, he gave out a horrible laugh. So that was the only difference when Lord Brahma talked to him from his past lifetimes, when he just gave himself to the well of death and rebirth. But this time he looked around before he fell in and gave out this horrible laugh. And Lord Brahma turned to Vasishtha and said, you see the difference there? Now let's watch him come out into rebirth again. So the next time rebirth he came out, showed signs because of habit, samsara, some scars and so forth of doing this, but moved through it quickly and made this jump in his lifetime. He went to gain a glimpse of the truth, but only at the moment of death. And, yes, I've just told you that. So in his last birth, he gained a glimpse of the truth, we think probably because of holy company, Lord Brahma taking him in hand and saying, you've got to wake up here. So then he was reborn with half-developed wisdom and went to seek guidance. He came to Lord Brahma and said, what was that you said? Would you tell me that again? And then he had then secured for himself holy company, grace, and a wise guru and initiation into the path. At that point, samsara came to an end. And he mastered his desires, he broke his attachments and attained jnanam, knowledge of the self. Should we go back? Paravid, aparavid, or Vidyashakti, avidyashakti. He made the right decision, went in the correct direction with the right orientation, the right perspective, and got holy company and gained the guru. All the best things in spiritual life that you need. And then after that he attained the incomparable state of para Brahma. So he did finally take this trajectory of Vidyashakti back to his true self, his true source. Back down here, one quote finishes up a quick study of this chart. You see, this is the web of Maya, and it gets less and less dense with less and less fibers as you go on. Finally, there's none. And that's the pure mind, then. That's the result, not the impure mind. And so he broke the web of Maya right there. It doesn't exist anymore. It all became Brahman. And the transformation happened all inside of himself. And he had a few aids that helped him. So Vasishtha concludes with this experiment with his father. All become subject to bondage in a web of delusion due to desire-based mental projections. But the bound soul can save itself via holy company, wisdom, and sadhana, rightly practiced. So, coming back to those main practices of sadhana, so important. to the sadhaka and to the gaining of freedom, or moksha, or mukti. So that was right there at the birth of the jivas. So I like this because in the first class we're going to get through half of this chart, having done 3 or 4 other charts. And I think that that might take more time than we have. I think I will. This next chart is called the 3 Gateways, and it's very good for discussing what happens here at the division between Vidya and Avidya Shakti, and these 3 different ways in which people follow different paths in Maya that come to no good, or others that come to very good. So that will take 20, 25 minutes, so we don't have that right now. And this chart here I didn't really mean to spend a lot of time on anyway, so I think I'll end our last 5 minutes or so right there at the level of what we were discussing, Vidya and Avidya Shakti, and show you how this teaching that Shankara expanded for us in the Vivekachudamani shows us. So here's a quote. Maya is an insentient force that, though invested with inherent powers of obscuration and distortion, nevertheless is present to drive beings towards remembrance and enlightenment. The tantric adepts state that she covers our eyes with one hand, but leads us towards freedom with the other. This directive power is Prakasha Shakti. Prakasha is the revelatory light. Prakashaka is its revealer. Prakasha is the thing revealed. So we have a Tripurti teaching right there about Prakasha Shakti. So I had heard so much about Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. So I just decided I'm going to make a chart that focuses on the good part of this. This is, when you say Avarana Shakti, you're really saying Avarana Maya, of course, and the obscuring power too is a kind of Maya. So these are fleshing out our knowledge of Vidya and Avidya in that chart, and how people could take to, as that chart said, they could take to Vidya Shakti and return to Paravid. But so many of them there at the birth of the jivas, after nature's happened and so forth, forget that connection they have with Shakti and with higher powers, and maybe teachers of the past that tried to save them, like Lord Brahma was trying to save Manas. And forgetfulness happens, and then falling into these evolutes of Maya, which we will start right away with next week at our class. So I decided that we would focus on Maya's influence towards higher, towards fulfillment and so forth. So this is the revelatory power we're talking about. How Maya's influence leads to freedom, which is a nice way for a change. So to put it down there, of course, there's the 3 Mahashaktis right there. Avarana Shakti, Vikshepa Shakti, and Prakasha Shakti. Avarana Shakti veils the mind on individual, collective, and cosmic levels. So whatever level happens to be going on where that power is needed or invested, that's the obscuring power you see in everything. It can be so obvious as just to obscure the obvious truths from people who have no intelligence, or it can be so fine that it can even obscure wisdom from the seers. So on all levels, it's going on like that. It's it's related to the gunas of tamas. And it works in conjunction with Vikshepa Shakti. Vikshepa Shakti then is the power of distortion. It distorts the mind on all of those same 3 levels. What I said applies also in the way of distortion. Like you look into a lake and you see yourself perfectly, but then something falls there, a leaf or whatever, all of a sudden it's all distorted. So that's the power of taking something that is real and making it seem unreal or different than what it truly is. And that also happens on all three of these levels. In the individual mind, at the collective level, like say of your ancestors and the gods and goddesses, and also at the level of the Trinity, where distortion takes on a very, very fine play. Great seers, for instance, trying to see through these distortions to the real thing. Then there's Prakasha Shakti, and we'll have to end there. Maybe we can either do that much of this chart and start with the 16 Evolutes next week, or we can use this as a pivotal place. But Prakasha Shakti is the power of revelation. It clarifies the mind by revealing the actual nature of things. Like I said earlier, when a great idea comes to you, or a great solution, something that you're thinking about in math or in music or in medicine, any of the M's or any other of the Aparavidya kind of levels of things, people will have these great revelations. I see it, you see. There it is. And that moment, unlike the seer, they're taking everything to the ego, you see. They have to go back to the 16 Evolutes to show you that. It'll come more clear, but keep this in mind for next week's class. When that happens to a seer, it's like, thank you, Mother. Immediately, I worship you. You're the one that did that. The absence of the ego is like everything, or the presence of the ripe ego and the getting rid of the presence of the unripe ego, as Sri Ramakrishna put it. Apakva and pakva hamkara. That's everything in the realm of spiritual growth. That means whether or not you'll ascend or not. Whether you'll accept Vidyashakti or accept did I say it right? Accept Vidyashakti or reject her, or accept Avidyashakti and not reject her. So that's, I would like to take that for the next 3 hours, if you'll just sit here with me and talk just about that and what happens. Is related to the gunas of sattva, the guna of sattva, and leads beyond it as well. That's very important. So everything about Prakasha Shakti is just blessed. You should be seeking her. May she, the primal guide, our refuge be. And she exposes truth in association with Atiropa and Apavada. See, so Atiropa, of course, is, I think there's something wrong here. That's Prakasha Shakti saying, why don't you look through this? See through it. I'm here. And then Apavada is, I see now, I see now. So in Vedanta, this would be a kind of tantric teaching leading to one of the great sadhana, chatushchaya. Where did you hear that last? At the beginning of class, when I read the story about Lord Brahma putting Vasishta into that Mayic funk. See? So that's a good place to end here, because we've run out of time. Coming full circle, we'll look at all of the things. In fact, I probably will start right about there next Sunday at the same time and segue that into the 16 Evolutes, since we've done this first half class, which I'm so happy that it went that fast, as fast as it did. And hopefully you can look back at your notes and at this class and become more and more clear about this. It's a rare teaching to go that deep into Maya. If anyone ever finds it taught anywhere else, let me know, because I'd like to know who else is going that deep into these darshanas and bringing out these facets, because I feel it's very important. So here then, let us end with a peace chant. Om Apyayantu, Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranaschakshuhu Shrotamatra Balaminindriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Mahabrahma Nirakuryam Mahabrahma Nirakaroda Nirakaranamasva Nirakaranam Meyastu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharmaste Mayi Shantu Te Mayi Shantu Om Shanti 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 May our bodies experience perfect health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our minds expand in the capacity to know Brahman. Because the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman, therefore may we never deny that Brahman. May Brahman never deny us, and may there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us. We who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman within us. May all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads and the non-dual scriptures also ever reside within us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.